What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. We are going to take a look at a clip from Iain Dale's LBC show last night, where he was discussing Boris Johnson's PMQs that was held live yesterday from Downing Street. On the show with him, he has a former senior diplomat in Brussels, Sir Andrew Cahn. The reason for this discussion is what Boris said during the live stream, where he called the MPs in Parliament trying to stop Brexit collaborators. Which, I'm sorry, is probably an apt description for a lot of them. Everything they have done is to the benefit of the EU at the expense of this country. They have contradicted themselves countless times, which Iain points out during this interview, referring to the video I covered yesterday showing multiple Remain MPs, including the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, and George Osborne, along with two of the people who are currently trying to go back on their own words and ignore the terms of Article 50 that they both voted for. Of course, we are talking about Dominic, Grieve and Phillip Hammond. So let's check it out.
All I ask is that people on the other side do the same. That's not too much to ask, is it? So when I hear the Prime Minister today using a word like collaborator, I instantly flinch. And this was used in the context, well, let me tell you what he said. He basically accused MPs who think they can block Brexit of a terrible collaboration with the European Union. He said the EU had become less willing to compromise on a new deal with the UK because of the opposition to leaving in Parliament. Now, I think he's right on that bit, but to use that word, collaborator, with all the historical context that there is on that, and we all know what it means, that effectively in the Second World War, British people collaborated with the Germans. That's the only use of that word. I mean, if you want to be pedantic on this, you can say, well, I mean, the literal meaning, Iain, is this, that or the other. And you would have a point. But we all know what most people take from that word. So I want to know two things. Was he right to use the word? And is he right on the substance of his argument, which says that the EU is less willing to compromise because of people like Phillip Hammond, Dominic, Grieve and all the rest in Parliament who are determined to frustrate us leaving on October the 31st? So two different but allied questions. Sir Andrew Cahn is a former chief executive of UK Trade and Investment, former senior diplomat in Brussels. Sir Andrew, very good evening to you again.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Good to talk to you, Ian.
Now, there are two different questions there. Let's deal with the collaborator one first. I imagine you think that language could have been different.
I think it's not prime ministerial. It's not what you expect from a statesman. It's a sort of party political point. But I'm very much with you that we have to respect the other side. I mean, I respect... I believe it would be better for us not to leave the European Union, but I respect the fact that 52% of the country the voters voted for it, and they're genuine, they believe that's the right thing to do. I respect them for it. But I want to be respected too, that 48% of the voters voted the other way, and they also genuinely feel that's the right thing to do, and we both need to respect the other side. Though on this case, of course, we're not talking about whether you're right to be a Remainer or a Leaver. We're talking about whether you're right or wrong to think that no deal is a bad thing. And that's a very different question.
It is, but of course, most of the MPs that are trying to frustrate this process, I mean, they've said it themselves, they voted to trigger Article 50, and one of the consequences of doing that was the possibility that at the end of it, there might not be a deal.
Well, at the time, during the referendum campaign, we were told endlessly that this was going to be the easiest negotiation in history. The idea of no deal was never, ever put to the British people.
It absolutely was. There's a video released this morning by Change Britain which shows all sorts of different politicians, including Phillip Hammond, talking about WTO rules and all the rest of it. So it is actually a complete... Well, I'm going to be very careful about the word I use here. It is not correct. It is not correct to say that this was not raised in the referendum campaign.
And what was not debated in 2016 was the likelihood that we would end up leaving the EU with no deal.
Then, of course, there are those who will argue that we could pull out of the EU and fall back on the World Trade Organization rules.
There's relying on our existing membership of the World Trade Organization, where, like Russia or Brazil, you put nothing into the EU but get nothing out in terms of preferential access. That's the WTO model.
Okay, you activate Article 50.
You're going to activate that immediately?
That is what, if British people vote to leave, that's what we should do.
On the 28th of June, you will activate it at the European Council.
Have to do. What would happen next? You have 2 years to negotiate. At the end of those 2 years, you are out, and you have to operate under World Trade Organization rules.
And at the end of that 2 years, there is no guarantee that agreement will have been reached, but our exit would be automatic.
If we vote to leave, the clock starts ticking on 2 years. If we haven't negotiated a new trading arrangement with the European Union in 2 years, and you said this yourself, Nigel, we revert to what are called World Trade Organization terms.
What would happen if that deal to leave wasn't done within 2 years? Our current access to the single market would cease immediately after 2 years were up. If we vote to leave, we are facing potentially a decade of uncertainty. 2 years to get out of the European Union, 7 years to negotiate a trade deal with the European Union, a free trade agreement, or WTO rules. All of these are doable, and people who want to leave the EU should decide which they favour.
The electorate will have spoken. We will have to invoke Article 50. Once you invoke Article 50, it is a one-way street to the exit, which will happen in 2 years with no agreement of any kind at all, if necessary.
And what was not debated in 2016 was the likelihood that we would end up leaving the EU with no deal.
Okay, perhaps I overstated it, but what is certainly the case is that during the referendum campaign, the general impression was given, the general argument was made that there was no question of no deal. We would have a close relationship, and one of the interesting things is that over time we have moved from an idea that we would have a close trading relationship and indeed a close political relationship with Europe after leaving, to the idea that somehow or other we've got to separate, we've got to cut all our bonds and be completely separate.
No, again, that's an exaggeration as well. Well, no one suggested we should cut all our bonds or be completely separate. Of course, Europe, the EU and the individual EU countries will still form a major part of our trading relationship and indeed security.
What the deal means is that we, at least for a period of time, will have a very separate relationship. But look, I in a way we're not taking the argument in the different direction to where we should take it. The question is, should Boris Johnson have used the term collaborator? No, he shouldn't. Is it legitimate for Boris Johnson to say people who are arguing against no deal are weakening his negotiating position? Yes, it is. But I don't think it's reasonable of him to say, you mustn't do that. I mean, Phillip Hammond, who I think was the main person he's aiming at, voted 3 times for the deal, voted to leave, and was a loyal member of the cabinet of Theresa May, trying to find a way to leave the European Union. So I think it's pretty rich to argue that he's, as it were, unpatriotic or not, or betraying the result of the referendum.
Just finally,
what he is saying is no deal would be so bad for the country that you can't threaten it. And there's Boris saying, do or die. Well, I don't know about you, Iain, but I don't want my country to die. I don't think if the risk is either doing or dying, you can take the risk of dying. I think it's just too dangerous.
Do you think this was a deliberate use of the word collaborating? Because we've heard indirectly from people within Downing Street who seem to want to fight a people versus Parliament general election. And of course, if you want to do that, you then have to frame the narrative for that weeks in advance. And maybe this is all part of that.
Well, I think the clever clogs in Downing Street are indeed planning exactly a people versus Parliament election. I think Boris himself, I mean, we know him of old. He has a wonderful use of language, a very colourful use of language, and I think he probably is rather frustrated that he's trying to create a strategy of making Europe believe that we really will leave without a deal in order to force them to change. But I don't think they will. I mean, see, where I think he's wrong is I don't think Europe is prepared to change their stance, particularly when confronted with the really tight red lines that Boris has set out. What I do think will happen is that we will then leave with a no deal, and after a little bit of chaos, we will then reach an agreement pretty rapidly. We'll have to, because it'll be in both sides' interest to do so, but we'll go through some chaos before doing that. I don't think that Boris's argument that if only everybody in Britain would say we're leaving without a deal, we're really tough, and Parliament were to back him 100%, then Europe would cave in, it's not right. It's a recurring fantasy of the Eurosceptics that Europe will only cave in if we're tough, but that's not how it works.
All right, Sir Andrew, thank you very much. That's Sir Andrew Cahn there.
Now, Iain seems to have a real problem with Boris Johnson's words yesterday. I don't really care about it, and the use of the term collaborator, it's not a big deal. But Iain thinks it's such a terrible word because it was used to refer to people who collaborated with the Nazis. But it is also used in many different contexts, both good and bad. It was used hundreds of years before World War II, so for Iain to link that to that is ridiculous, and clutching at best. Especially when you consider it as the Remainers and left-wing fuckpigs who run around calling everyone a Nazi, not the Brexiteers. We rightly call these MPs and Remoaners in the media traitors, because that is what they are doing. But the way Iain Dale frames it, this is as if Boris Johnson was directing it at the average voter, when he is not, and rightly so. The average Remain voter will not be engaged in this game of tit for tat like the media and MPs are over the details of Brexit, or Brexit in general. Most will accept the result of the referendum and have carried on with their lives. A lot probably don't even keep up with politics enough to know that we're still in the EU. In no way is any Brexiteer politician or voter calling every Remain voter an undemocratic collaborator. The ones who get called out for it are the ones who openly wipe their ass with democracy and support the EU's position with constant scare stories in the media. Brexiteers have a problem with the MPs who want to block Brexit, not the average Joe on the street, and neither does the Prime Minister, Iain, you idiot. I would love to see you tell David the race-baiting fuckpig Lammy or Ian Blackford not to use charged language in the Brexit debate. Ian Blackford literally called Boris Johnson a racist in Parliament twice, and yet you sit there moaning about people calling these traitors collaborators when they are collaborating to keep us in the EU. They are serving the EU's will at the end of the day. Either knowingly or accidentally makes no difference. They are still doing it. The Remoaner Andrew obviously does not like what Boris said because he's a former Brussels stooge with connections there, and these people don't like being called out for their treachery. I've said it multiple times before. If we was in wartime, it would be considered treason. He claims he respects the Leave voters' choice and wants us to respect him, which we all will if he will openly respect the will of the people and defend the vote they made. The reason people have zero respect for Remoaners in the media and Parliament is because they have spent the last 3 years lying consistently while openly campaigning against the best interest of the British people and Brexit. The Remoaners have damaged the economy and the UK's position in any negotiations, so they have effectively worked to make the EU's position stronger than ours. When our elected officials serve the EU more than us, we call them out for it and lose all respect for them. Iain rightly points out what I said earlier about the video evidence of these Remoaners discussing a no-deal Brexit months before the 2016 referendum, which forces the lying fuckpig to change his wording to people said this and that about getting a deal, which of course is true, but he's forgetting the undisputable fact that Leave won the vote. That's all that matters. All these Remoaner MPs and media outlets have spent the last 3 years talking down the UK's position regarding leaving the EU, which made getting a good deal impossible. The EU knew Theresa May did not want to leave, and so they gave her a deal they knew would never be accepted by the politicians or the British public, in the hope we would revoke Article 50. At the end of the day, what was said during the 2016 referendum campaign is beyond irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the vote and Article 50 that the MPs passed into law, stating we leave on WTO terms if no deal is found. Andrew is miles off base if he thinks that the Leave voters wanted a close political relationship with the EU. We want the same political relationship with the EU as every other member of NATO or any other friendly country the world over. We do not need anything different from that. We will make our own laws and political decisions. The point of Brexit was to get out of the undemocratic EU laws, not stay within them, you idiot. We will trade with them the same as anyone else. If they don't want to pay the £500 billion a year in tariffs for the stuff they buy from us, then they will have to settle for a free trade deal on the goods that they want, providing it benefits us equally. The ball is in their court. We would have to pay less than $50 billion a year in tariffs to the EU on WTO terms, if I remember rightly, so we hold all the cards. Even if the Remoaners make out like we don't, it's not up for debate anymore. When Iain corrects Andrew's ridiculous statement about a no-deal Brexit meaning we cut all ties with the EU, he is quick to change the subject. Classic Remoaner tactic when they lose an argument, that is. It forces him to go back to Boris using the term collaborators. Yes, he should have used it because it would appear as though they are, as I've said multiple times. He makes out Phillip Hammond voting for the Maybot deal means he wanted Brexit. No shitweasel, that deal was keeping us in the EU, while pretending to take us out of the EU.
So you go, great news, I've done us a deal to leave. What's the deal? We've got to pay the manager £40 billion. And then we get to leave? Technically, yes. What do you mean, technically? Well, physically, we'll still be in the bogey. But if anyone asks you, are you in Burger King, you'll be able to tell them, no, we left.
This idiot thinks Boris Johnson's do or die comment was relating to the country dying, when he would have been referring to his political career tosspot, not the country. Andrew finishes up that clip talking about the EU not backing down and giving concessions, which is fine with us. We can trade on WTO terms and make some money. Boris already knows that, so saying we will leave in October is not just words, mate, it's the law as it stands. Boris did not set out these red lines as he claims. Article 50 set them out, and the 498 MPs that voted on it delivered the public's choice to leave the EU. That's democracy last I checked. The EU will either have to come with a great deal before Brexit, which they likely won't, or one just after Brexit happens and we've left without a deal. Their big businesses won't want to pay the huge tariffs I spoke about earlier, and the government won't like the effect the drop in exports has on their economy. It's basic common fucking sense. Big business lobbies all political parties when things don't go their way. So, they will do it again. This Andrew guy is full of shit though. Now let's check out the final clip where we hear from a Brexit Party MEP on the subject.
Lance Foreman joins us, Brexit Party MEP for London. Lance, very good evening. What do you make of this word, collaboration?
Well, in effect, they are sort of collaborating with the EU. They are weakening our hand in the negotiation. Nobody really wants no deal, but if you do want to get a deal, you have to let the other side know that you are prepared to walk away. And for, since the time since we initiated Article 50, we should have been making full preparations for no deal, and it's tragic that Phillip Hammond never did that. He's been scuppering our chances in these negotiations from day one.
We can agree with that, but as somebody who had a swastika daubed on your premises not so long ago, you know the historical context of the use of this word, and it's not a word that should be used by a Prime Minister in the context of his political opponents, or in this case, somebody who's actually in his own party.
Well, people are using very colourful language. People are getting very frustrated. People are getting very angry. But I've always thought that tempers need to be calmed down with this. It is at the end of the day just a negotiation, and everything can change at 1 minute to 11. I believe that the EU don't want us to walk away with no deal. I believe they do want to do a deal with us, and they can do a deal right at that very last moment. All they have to do at 1 minute to 11 is say, you know what, let's do a free trade deal with you, and we will negotiate it over a period of time. But in the meantime, we can continue on the basis of WTO Article 24, which means it just carries on. That can happen right at that very last minute.
But they have to agree to that.
Well, of course, and why would they? Because at the moment they are making us sweat, and we are sweating. We're getting people are getting very worried, and that's exactly what they're hoping for. And whenever you get Remainers sort of saying this is going to be a disaster, it's going to be a disaster, that helps the EU's negotiating hand. We have to stay calm. We have to look at this rationally. And when you look at it rationally, common sense usually prevails. And what is common sense here? Common sense is that a free trade deal is in both parties' interests. It's obvious. It has to be. But if they don't see it, and if the EU feel that they want to punish us in some way because they want to set a precedent for other countries not wanting to leave, then, we have to be prepared to walk away. And I think that very soon afterwards, they will still want to discuss a free trade deal with us, because they export so much more to us than we do to them. And the German economy, we are their biggest market, and the German economy is really struggling now. We've grown at 1.2% over the last year. The German economy is less than half that. Germany is struggling. If Germany's struggling, the whole of Europe is struggling. They need to work with us.
Just on that, and as a point of information more than anything else, of course, we got our growth figures last week, minus 0.2%, very worrying in many ways. Hang on a second, but the German figure yesterday was minus 0.1%. So that our negative growth is being attributed to Brexit. Well, I'm not sure that can entirely be right if the Germans are also in negative growth.
No, well, you just can't take things over 1 quarter and expect, and make a long-term view over 1 quarter. Taking it over a year is much more sensible because we did actually grow by 0.5% in the first quarter, and that was higher than expected. I think people were stockpiling. There was a lot more, manufacturing going on in the first quarter. And when we didn't leave the end of March, people sort of perhaps started using some of the stockpiled goods, perhaps. We don't know, but that's why I said if you take the growth over a year, you get a much better picture. And Germany is struggling. Italy is it hasn't grown for ages, and in fact the whole eurozone is growing at a slower pace than the UK. And just look at what the Treasury was saying. Even at the time of the referendum, they said that once, if we vote to leave, not if we do leave, but if we actually vote to leave, we will lose 800,000 jobs. Instead, we have grown 1 million jobs. The Treasury modelling has been completely wrong on this. It's been scaremongering from day one. We should be much more confident in our position now.
All right, Lance, thank you very much. That's Lance Foreman, the Brexit Party MEP for London.
Well, props to Iain Dale for getting an equal amount of competing views. Someone needs to send this to the BBC because they could learn a thing or two from it. The Brexit Party MEP starts with pretty much the same things I have said about all them collaborating and the effects of what they're doing has had on our negotiating position, pointing out Philip Hammond's now well-known and documented policy when he was Chancellor. Do not prepare for no deal or do the absolute minimum. Iain Dale is so stuck on this ridiculous notion everyone associates the term collaboration with World War II Germany, it's really getting annoying though. No, you idiot. Collaboration is used daily. The Remainer parties plan to collaborate to stop no deal. While they hold authoritarian views, they are not Nazis. So it's only you and other media fuckpigs who are making the connection with the World War II. Everyone with sense, like this Brexit MEP, thinks of it as working together against us to support the EU's agenda. Not that they are working with the fucking Nazis, you idiot. The Labour Party are being investigated for what seems to be a rabid hatred of Jewish people, putting them on par with the BNP when it comes to being investigated for these types of accusations, which likely makes them closer to the Nazis than collaborating with the EU. So yeah, this bullshit about collaborating being a Nazi thing is wrong. It's used often for many different reasons, both good and bad as I've already said. The Brexit Party MEP claims people are getting angry, which in my opinion, it's only the Remainers who are getting angry. The desperation is taking over now. There are constant attacks against Brexiteers, calling them stupid, racist, or trying to tell them what they did or didn't vote for. And let's not forget all the Brexit supporting political figures who have had milkshake thrown on them like Nigel Farage, Sargon of Akkad and Tommy Robinson. It's not Brexiteers doing this shit, is it? It's rabid Remoaners at the end of the day. They are angry and bitter little shitweasels who can't take it they lost. The Brexit Party MEP points out that the EU will likely cave at the last minute, as it will benefit more from a free trade deal than we will, since, as I have said, and Lance pointed out during his response, they will need a free trade deal more than we do because they export more to us than we do to them, pointing out the German economy is struggling, so the whole EU is struggling, and they are not going to want to pay that 500 billion, are they? Iain Dale is right though when he points out this talk about a drop in the UK growth related to Brexit is bullshit, since Germany also had a drop in growth as did many other countries. But of course we know the mainstream media generally gloss over that fact to push the anti-Brexit Project Fear narrative. You also heard Lance absolutely destroy the 2016 scare stories about 800,000 job losses, with the fact employment has grown by 1 million jobs since 2016. If he would have tried to say that on the BBC though, he would have been shouted down. So well done to Iain for letting him finish. But I'm going to end the video there, guys. Iain Dale shits on the Remoaner Sir Andrew Cahn's claims no one discussed a no-deal Brexit in the lead-up to the 2016 referendum, quoting the video I covered yesterday, which proves the main Tory Remoaners had discussed the WTO Brexit back then, and the fact Article 50 means leave come hell or high water. And obviously the Brexit Party MEP, as you heard, pretty much said similar shit to what I had said, because... Now, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Remember to like, subscribe and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.